Hi, and welcome to College Planning Untangled. This is Kristin Clark, and I'm here today with Bobby Hood, and we're going to help you make college planning just simpler and make it easier for our families. Bobby, what's going on today?
Oh man, I'm just excited to be here again and talk about something that we've that is really close to my area of interest for sure. Uh, this week we're just going to talk generally about college admissions, the college admissions process overall, because I think we've seen some things come out in the news in the last couple of weeks that really are super interesting, and so I think we should get right to it. So we've got a really close friend of mine, Douglas McLemore, from UC Davis. So let's bring Doug up. And so Doug is with the Health Advising Department. He's the test prep specialist at UC Davis, and he helps students at UC Davis prepare for standardized tests there, like the MCAT and things like that. But also, apart from UC Davis, I think Doug and I have worked together for many years, helping students from middle school all the way up to college, preparing for standardized tests. And Doug does a lot of academic prep, as well as just basically every standardized test, every kind of academic work that you can think of. I mostly do the standardized tests and some academic subjects, but Doug does almost all of them because Doug has a lot of background in sciences. Doug was a chemistry professor at one time, and now he's back working in the university environment again. And so that's probably not even like a quarter of all of the things that Douglas does. But so welcome, Doug. I'd love for you to kind of fill in, tell us more about yourself and what you're doing at UC Davis.
Well, thank you guys. So I don't want to say it's all subjects, but I focus primarily on math and science for middle school students, high school students, and college students in the academic realm. And then I do pretty much most of the standardized tests that are involved in getting from high school to college, except for the English, AP English, things like that. So the math and science realm is pretty much where I stay home, and I don't focus much on the other subjects besides that. So not everything, but thank you for that thought.
Okay, I've got a question for you. This is Random Thoughts by Kristin, by the way, but are more boys or girls coming to you for math? In the past, it's always been that girls have not been as good at math as boys have, or men and girls, whatever. But tell me what you're seeing. I'm just curious.
I have more female students than male students, for sure.
Now, is that because
they're science?
Is that because they're needing help, or because they're good at it and they want to get better?
I would say the bulk of my students that genuinely need help are about even 50-50 male female. I just generally have more female students that come to me than male students.
Yeah, this is a fascinating question, Kristin, because I think the perceptions, that old perception that women aren't as good is just straight up not been my experience. I mean, I have a student. I mean, this is just an example. Of course, a lot of this stuff is anecdotal. But watching things over the years. I mean, I have a student that I just was speaking with yesterday. I worked with her this spring on the SAT. She went from, she started at a 1480 SAT. In 3 hours, she was at a 1590 SAT. And now because the SAT has been canceled until August, she's just decided she'd like to work on the ACT, even though she's at a near perfect score on the SAT. She's flawless, near flawless on math and science, and just killing it. And she's one of the best students I've ever had. And many of my best students I've ever had on the math and science have been female. It's not without a question. And so one of my big goals over the years in standardized tests has been making sure that female students don't let standardized tests trick them into thinking that for some reason they aren't as good, because often grades wise, you see them. I think nowadays they are competing just as well. And what can happen is, when they start going into STEM fields in college, in the past they might get kind of intimidated out of it because of professors or things like that. But I think now it's pretty. Are you seeing it as an equal playing field now, more in the college environment, Doug?
Yeah, honestly, yes. I don't
great.
honestly see a male-female divide as far as ability level.
That's wonderful.
I do see a male-female divide as far as the discouraging comments that I often hear women get versus men.
Yeah.
So
they still have the barriers. Yeah.
Yeah. I will get students coming in for advising where some of the female students just say, "Are you sure you want to be a doctor? Or wouldn't you feel more comfortable being a nurse?" And where the male students, even though their stats might be way worse and their preparedness may be way worse, they're still being encouraged to be a doctor.
Yeah, they're constantly encouraged to become a doctor. That's probably really great that you're there at the health advising, office, because I imagine you're probably a voice in the right direction of giving people, probably counteracting that in both ways, because if their stats, if their test scores aren't leading, or saying, okay, you shouldn't be going to med school, you're probably going to say, hey, why don't you consider one of these other options, whether they are male or female. You're going to say, hey, here's some other options that, might make more sense, right?
And just for full disclosure, our advising policy is that all students can do what they want to do.
No, yeah,
we never tell a student that they can't do something. That the plan is that there is no plan, and so that if something goes awry, then we'll find a way to get around that. So,
that's great. That's a really positive attitude, and that actually kind of leads us into kind of what we're aiming to talk about, which is college prep, or college admissions is a horribly stressful process, both undergraduate and in applying to med school or grad school or whatever. And so in the age of this, all the changes that are happening due to the coronavirus situation, we know there are some big changes.
Sorry about that.
Doug's dogs are trying to say hi and join in. They might have some opinions too. So in this age, everything's going to change. I mean, certainly for the class of 2021, right? We know there are some changes that are going to happen to college admissions. And Douglas and I both have been college admissions advisors for many years, although it's not for either of us our number one thing that we do. But we have both advised many students on both college admissions and admissions into grad school. So I guess my questions I just wanted to talk to you about today are how is it going to change for class of 2021? How is it going to change for future classes? What the heck is going on with University of California system and this whole test optional thing? I mean, that's kind of the whole idea. And the whole point of this live stream, College Planning Untangled, is just to let people know everything seems scary and complicated, but it doesn't really have to be that scary. Let's just try to take a couple of pieces of this and untangle it a little bit. That's the whole idea. So what are your thoughts about any of that? Which piece of that do you want to think about, Doug?
Me?
Yeah,
so
sure. Or any of you. I don't know.
Well, I think since it's close to home for me, I think we can delve into the UC system decision and how that actually has national ramifications.
Yeah, sure.
So UC recently, was it last week?
Yeah, I think so.
This has been in the works for a very long time now. It's the reason the SAT has changed so often in the last 15 years has been more or less because of the UC system threatening to not use SAT. So the SAT changed from a 1,600 point test to a 2,400 test. Then it changed from 2,400 back to 1,600. Then it changed formats from that again to its current format. Those are all been threats from the UC system saying it's not a test that's relevant. It's showing students' ability to succeed at our colleges. So fix it is basically what the regents and the system president would say to College Board. And the most recent thing was just because of coronavirus, it was easy for them to just say, okay, well, let's just throw it out. And so it's not just that they went test optional, they went test optional for 2 years, and then they're test neutral. Like there's no requirement for tests starting in what it's 2023 for 2 years.
Okay.
And then their intent is to create their own standardized test for getting into the UC system.
Right.
I think that's a whole nother ball of wax that is not even relevant right now because it's in the future.
Yeah, it won't affect any of the students who are in high school right now. Yeah.
But what I think you'll see is that since UC did it, you're going to see a lot more campuses, a lot more systems go that route because UC has always been the leader in a lot of ways for what other campuses and other institutions consider the standard, the norm. So I think this is just a nail in the coffin that is standardized test, like the ACT and the SAT anyway, for admissions requirements. Does that mean they're not going to be something people have to take anymore? Probably not, but it does mean that the requirement expectations are probably going to change, and probably soon, because this is just the door was opened for a lot of other big systems to do the same kind of change.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so like for years, I mean, I guess California, this is just more evidence that for many years we've all, like, if you've paid attention to this, that California has been the leader just from straight numbers and power. Basically, like, I think it's the same with high school textbooks, right? Whatever textbooks California and Texas adopt become the textbooks for the entire nation. So the entire nation all uses either the California textbook or the Texas textbook is in like 95% of public schools. Same thing with standardized tests. Basically, whatever California does, 90% of the other schools are eventually going to follow that, probably because they're just the lead, because so many schools banded together doing it. And so, so you kind of hit the point there at the end, Doug, which is what I'm thinking of, because as a tutor, I have all these parents, well, not all of them, a few parents come to me and say, I hear that a lot of schools have gone test optional or test neutral, or I hear the SAT doesn't matter anymore. But as you said, if you pay attention to what UC University of California system said, or these other schools that say test optional say, they're saying that you don't need it for admissions, or it's optional for admissions. So if you, like, for right now, if for some reason coronavirus makes you unable to take the test, you can get in to school. You won't be punished for not having the SAT, ACT. You can get into school based on your other merits if you have a sufficiently good GPA and recommendation letters and all that. But in the fine print, even University of California system, it still says, like the next sentence of the article says, of course, we're still going to look at the SAT and ACT scores when we're thinking of merit aid and getting you into departments. Like if you want to be an engineering student, they're probably still going to look at what your SAT score was, what your math score was on the SAT, to see if you're going to get an engineering school. Is that what you're understanding too, Doug?
Yes. Like, it's not that they aren't going to use it at all. The admissions decision isn't going to be based upon the score, but a lot of other decisions and competitiveness overall is still going to be an issue. And this is, I mean, it can be said, like, if you look at the CSU system, the California state system, which is a different system than the UC system, they've been test optional for years. And yet every student that goes to the CSU programs, they still have to take the ACT, SAT so that they're at least competitive. So it's not a matter of whether or not they'll get in, it's whether they compare well against other people. So if you don't have an ACT or an SAT score, you're still going to look less competitive against somebody that doesn't have an ACT, or who does have an ACT or SAT score on their application. So
absolutely,
it's just because it's optional doesn't mean it's not going to affect somebody's application.
Absolutely. And I think that, when you go back, like, I think what a lot of people who are watching this need to kind of keep in mind is that, and also just an aside, if you're watching this on YouTube and not live, just let people know that you're rewatching this. Just type into the comments, please, hashtag replay, so that people know that you are viewing this later instead of live on Facebook. And if you are watching this live, Feel free to type in questions anytime. We're always happy to answer questions. The thing that's important to remember is like this whole conversation about test optional and not taking the SAT or ACT is about students who are just like literally trying to get admitted to a school so that they can go to college, which is not the conversation that mostly the students that we're working with and the students who would be watching videos like this often are really having. The students who come to me and to Doug who are looking at these sorts of things, what usually people are going into test prep or thinking about college admissions strategies and planning are thinking about, they're not trying to get accepted necessarily to schools. They're trying to get into a school. They're trying to choose, 3 or 5 schools to apply to and figure out of those schools which one will make them happy and comfortable, which one they are going to be able to get a financially affordable deal that their family can actually pay for, right? They're trying to figure out where they are going to be able to find a happy and affordable place to go. And with respect to once you get admitted, then there's so much more college planning left that involves the FAFSA filling out and financial aid and merit. And so I would say that a solid, half of the students who come to me for tutoring, the parents or the student aren't saying to me, I need to get my score up so that I get into school. They're saying, I've got a 27 on the ACT, but University of Arkansas or Oklahoma has told me that if I get a 29, I will get in-state tuition costs instead of out-of-state tuition costs. And that's going to take my tuition from $94,000 down to $25,000. And that's what we were per year, or some crazy number like that. It's going to save us $60,000 in tuition. That's what we need, is 2 points on the ACT to get from out of state to in-state. And that's where, even if schools go test optional, that stuff is still going to exist, right? I mean, so that's my thought on this, right?
Well, I see actually a lot of my students are in a slightly different boat because they're trying to get into what would be considered a premier program. And so they want to do the ACT and SAT and try to make themselves the most competitive candidate for a particular school, like a more premier school, rather than just trying to be able to afford to go into that school.
So is that like trying to get into something like UC Berkeley and you need this number, or you just need to be the most competitive to get into a school that's or something like that?
Yeah. Or the perception is that a lot of your premier schools like a Berkeley or like a, something national, like a Yale or a Harvard,
sure.
That, Harvard and Yale, I believe, are also test optional, and they have been for a couple of years.
Yeah.
But yet still people need that test score to be competitive to get into one of those schools, even on an academic basis, because they're, you look at somebody who's applying to Harvard without an SAT score, they're going to be at a severe disadvantage compared to somebody who has a very high SAT score. So I see it that even though these schools might become test optional, that you're still there's some prestige factor of having a very high SAT ACT that you're not going to get rid of overnight. It's not going to be an instantaneous change that people are going to be like, oh yeah, nobody cares about the ACT score.
Right. And see, that's what. Whatever. Yeah, that's what's confusing about this, especially with the Harvard and Yale thing, is okay, they're test optional, and I think that's where you need to look at the numbers in this, because if I recall correctly, I mean, they've been test optional for a few years, but I would imagine 97% of their entering class submitted an SAT score, or probably 99% of their entering class submitted an SAT or ACT score, right? But the key is that 2% didn't. Right. And so that's what's really important, is they need to be test optional, and they do need to accept that 5% or 3% or whatever percent it is. And I think it is important that they be test optional, so that, because there are some students for whom the SAT and ACT is an extremely unworkable biased test, particularly for some students. So there are some students who ought to be admitted completely without considering those tests, for sure. And in fact, it may be the case that those tests should not exist at all and should be replaced by different tests. And personally, I hate the SAT. I don't like the SAT at all. I'm in favor of the SAT being replaced with some other better test, and so, yeah, so that is the other conversation down the road. Does UC systems successfully create another test? Is it going to be better? Is it going to be less biased? Who knows? It'll be neat to see. And I guess then, we begin tutoring for that thing. There is an accusation or a criticism being made that, of course, if the UC system successfully gets a bunch of people to stop caring about tests at all, at standardized tests at all, that all that's going to happen is you start getting enormous grade inflation at private schools across the nation, which I would argue kind of has already happened. But so then suddenly just all the students at all the private schools all across the nation start graduating with 4.5s all across the board so that they can be competitive, and it just makes the problem worse.
What are you talking about? 5.0. Holy cow.
Well, see, I don't know. This is how old I am. That I still didn't even, the school I went to had a 100-point scale. So I thought
that's happening now,
Right.
And especially for the kids that we're probably working with, that they're getting, I know at the schools my boys went to, the scale was 4.0, and they had kids were coming out with 4.589379094. They had to go to that length, to.
Yeah, and if you graduate with a 4.0, that's a terrible GPA.
Right, I know. Right. I got to tell you, even my little one graduated with 3.5, and I was like, man, he's not very smart. And I was like, oh my God, what?
What is happening?
That's smart.
well, and seeing that's part of this is that. So, I think it is fair to say that, GPAs are near meaningless at this point, at least on a comparative basis. So you got to have, you have to understand, colleges have to have something to compare students on. And the idea of the University of California system, this is what, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this, Doug, is, if, the University of California system has got to have, in total, 700,000-800,000 students applying to the system every year, way more probably.
More.
So how in the world are you supposed to holistically compare all of these students on a merit basis without without a test number? What are you supposed to do to compare all them? You can't read all those rec letters.
There's a big fear that the underserved population schools, students, are going to be at a huge disadvantage because of this.
But the whole point is to help
compare
them, right?
Somebody from an underserved population, their GPA is not even going to be close to what a GPA is going to be from a very well established school district. So
you know what? Doug, I've got a question for you on that, because I would tell you that I saw people moving out of more competitive districts into less competitive districts because they could have the higher GPAs in comparison in that area. So
well, I think that underserved versus less competitive is a whole different ball game. So if we're talking an affluent versus a not as affluent area, but it's primarily white students in the school, that's a different comparison than what I'm making, which is talking about underserved populations where the school might be 50% plus in minority students. And those schools generally can't afford, or their focus is just getting the students to come to school. And so we're talking urban schools in, say, LA, or in Dallas, or these urban places where they are just always at a disadvantage regardless when it comes to programs. So they don't even have AP classes, or if they have AP classes, they can't get the students to pass the AP classes. So, they're just academic rigor is not very high. And so their grade points are not going to be able to hit these types of things, or they're just not going to be as competitive. And that's a concern. So I think the only way to really look at that is to, as long as schools are looking at ranking within the school itself, not between schools, that's the only agnostic way I think you can go if you're just using grade point.
Yeah.
So if a student is Say again?
But even at that, I would tell you, let's go back to that example of on the books, I had a student that was a 3.5, which is basically a B plus, right? And then you had people that were at 4.5. Well, B plus is still not a dumb kid, right?
Yeah,
right.
So you look at that. And by the way, he was at the 50th percentile, actually a little bit lower than that in that school. So, I look at that and I go, if you're in a really competitive school, is that fair?
Right. That student's at a 50th percentile.
So, like, as a whole, the system, I think, is broken.
Right.
I'm just going to straight up say
and
it.
so, exactly. And so this is where we get to the point, which is, I just was realizing that as we were talking about this, is that, so we're trying to like untangle the college admissions process, and I've just found myself getting hugely confused about what's going on. Like, I'm confused now about this, and this is something that I think about and I'm trying to actually study. Like, this is freaking confusing. So now if we back up for a second and say, okay.
Bob, I'll tell you a way to untangle.
Yes.
And that's what I see. And when I'm talking, I kind of look at the 80 percenters. I don't look at the elite, right?
Right.
But 80 percenters, every school lists what do you need for a grade point and what do you need for ACT or ACT to win, or at least be in the 50th percentile, 75th percentile. It's really, if you look at the college websites, they do simplify it for you.
Right.
So,
absolutely. And so, so
Can
this
I add
is
something to that?
Absolutely, Doug. Yeah.
So I do want to point out that the numbers that a lot of these schools will post on websites are just averages, by the way. So just because your GPA is lower and your ACT, SAT score is lower than what they have on these websites doesn't mean you should not apply. There's a lot of things that go into an application besides these statistics. And I think we lose sight of that sometimes. So the other things you do, your experiences that you have, the personal statement that you write, all of those things matter. So like, don't be discouraged by just like, I don't have the score. I hear this a lot, like all the time. Like, oh, Berkeley wants me to have this. It's like, no, Berkeley says, here's what my average student has. And average is middle of the route, which means some students with higher stats aren't getting in because they have terrible rest of their application. And students with lower stats are getting in because they have good rest of their application. So like, it's, I agree with what you're saying. That those numbers are important. They can like clear up what is going on, but you also have to realize too, is that just because you aren't at those numbers means you can still get into those schools. You should still apply. You shouldn't give up.
For sure.
Trying to go to those types of schools that have stats that are higher than what you want.
And I'd say right now, if there is a school that you feel like you're a little bit on the bubble, this would probably be a really good time to keep going after it, because I know that families are questioning right now whether they want to send their kid off to college a lot more than any other year, for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
Anecdotally, I think I've seen this not only at high school going to college level, but college going on to like med school, dental school, etc. That there's a reticence to apply this year. I think we're going to see enrollment or applications drop this year.
Yes.
And I'm afraid that also means next year we're going to see applications bubble. I think we're going to see a whole lot more people, because the normal group is going to come through, and then all the people that decided, the
ones that skipped a year, th're all going to apply next year.
Which is funny, because I'm just like, apply this year, man. Like, there's going to be less people applying. Just go and apply. Like, this is your better chance.
For sure. And so that's, and so now coming back to like just the simplifying everything and like untangling things, right? So the stuff that we were getting all confused about, that's like, what is the future of all this? Well, that isn't important to the students who are in high school right now. If you are anywhere from freshman to senior right now in high school, what's going to happen right now is admissions requirements are going to be likely or definitely sliding to the easier, more generous, definitely for the class of 2021, probably very likely for the class of 2022. You still need an SAT and ACT score if you can at all manage to get one. If you can't, for some reason, there are a lot of schools that are going to be test optional, so you wouldn't be penalized on admission. But man, if you can get one, get one. And absolutely, if you can put, like, it's still just the same college admissions process, which is exactly what Doug was just saying. Get rec letters. If you haven't started getting, it's now summer. If you haven't started getting rec letters and you're a rising senior, start getting those rec letters right now. Contact those teachers right now and get rec letters from teachers from your sponsor and your activity that you're in. Start getting those right now. Get a resume together, pick out colleges, and like Doug said, and like Kristin was saying, go to the websites, go to the Princeton Review website, go to the Department of Education's website, where they have not just the average number of SAT score and ACT score, but that range that is the top and bottom, the 75th and 25th percentile, that is like the middle 50% of the class scored between these SAT and ACT numbers, or wherever in this range. That gives you a good idea. If you're somewhere in there, then yeah, you got a shot at getting into that school. That's it, right? And just trust that if you put together a good application and you have and you do several versions of your essays and have other people, like, look at them and tell you whether they make sense, that sort of thing, that's the thing to do, so things will be easier than they were. Your dog's getting excited. Oh, that's okay, Doug, don't worry about it. But those are the most important things to think about. And as someone who knows about college admissions and has advised students about college admissions over the years, and Doug also having done that, what we were trying to do today is just kind of tell people about that. I mean, I work with students every day, all year long, and I tutor students all over the nation, even students in other countries, because I work pretty much exclusively online. I know that Doug also tutors online, as well as some people in person out there in Davis. And so students can ask me questions. I'm always happy to answer questions. And Kristin helps people with choosing their college majors and figuring out their strengths. So all three of us are involved in helping students figure out, things about the college process. And so anyone can always feel happy to just contact me with questions. There is a contact me form on my website, bobbyhoodonlinetutoring.com. And so then, Douglas, I know you have, your website is ICOSA Prep, but tell us more about how students can contact you and what kind of tutoring you do and stuff, Doug, because I know Doug is, like, I refer a lot of students to Doug, particularly for academic tutoring in the sciences and for MCAT tutoring and things like that. But tell people what kind of tutoring they might be interested in and what kind of work you do.
Right now I do exclusively online tutoring because of COVID.
Yeah, sure.
We made that shift, but locally I work with students, from Marin down to pretty much anywhere in the Bay Area up to Sacramento. So I got a pretty big radius there. But online students as well. I want to try to focus on the online students, since my duties at UC Davis are kind of ramping up here a little bit.
Sure.
If you want to contact me to get a free consult to find out what I can do for you, you can always go to my website, icosaprep.com/consult. And you can set up a 30-minute session just through Zoom, where we'll just discuss what your needs are. And, I can give you a referral if it's something I can't manage for you. And then we can go from there.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. I mean, I have to say, Doug is one of the best tutors and teachers I've ever encountered in my life. And I basically refer any student to Doug that I can't handle myself. If Doug can do it, I send everyone to him. I've learned a great deal about tutoring and teaching from him over the years, and it's really been a great to get to work with him over the years. So he and I taught together in Austin. We taught MCAT courses together, and it's been great fun over the years.
Bobby's too kind. He's way better at cars than I am.
Cars is the MCAT reading comprehension course portion of the course. So yeah, when we taught together, he did the sciences and I did the reading comprehension.
Oh, sorry. That's a huge compliment coming from Bobby, because I can tell you there are a lot of people that bow to him and what they've done for their kiddos. So
no, it's fun. Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. All right. So Kristin, tell people how they can contact you. This has been great today.
Absolutely. I'm at KristinClark.com, and I help students figure out a career path after high school. And one of the things that I find is that kids are taking 6 years to get through a 4-year college education. And the biggest reason for that is they're changing majors. And if we can get ahead of that and spend more time figuring out a career path than figuring out how to decorate your dorm, we're ahead. If we can get that down to 5 years or even down to 4 where it should be, that would be great.
Oh, and by the way, Kristin, I had a couple of students who have signed up with you for that course you started a couple of weeks ago, and I've had 2 of them have reported back to me, and their parents said that their students are just absolutely loving it and finding it so valuable. And so they told me they said thank you to me very much for having referred to you or whatever. Their students are just absolutely loving it and really finding it very valuable. So that's very cool. What were you going to say, Doug?
I was just going to add onto that is like, if you want to finish in 4 years and you want to get into the sciences or a health related field, start your science and math your freshman year. Stop putting it off until your junior year, because you're not going to be ready.
Yeah, you can't try to do all of it in the way. Yeah, you can't do it. You got to do them in order and start getting going on it. All right. Well, this is great. Well, really, thank you so much for being with us today, Doug. This is excellent, and yeah, we'll probably have to continue this conversation in the future, because I know there's going to be more coming out on this topic. So this is awesome.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye bye.